This is a 1994 Legend, and it is a Toyota, an absolute Toyota. This car came from the 1990s Japanese Toyota era that also included the Toyota RX-7 and the Toyota 3000 GT and then Toyota 300ZX. But this car, the Supra, has risen above them all to become an icon from this era. Today, I'm going to explain why. I borrowed this Supra from a friend of mine located here in California, County Orange. He's working on a really cool project that's going to launch soon. Find out more about it at orange.com and be sure to follow him on Instagram by clicking the link in the description below. Now, back to the Supra. This car has only 6 miles on it. It has this 12-speed manual transmission that everybody wants, and it has been modified. This is the most desirable Supra of all, and in this condition, these can sell for huge money, and by that I mean well over $100. Yes, $100 for a 1994 Toyota. When I grew up, my dad had a 90s Toyota Supra. You know where that thing is now? Sitting on Craigslist where some guy's offering to trade it for a really nice futon, probably. But this Camry has its reasons for being so valuable. One major reason is this car's movie fame. As the Mark IV Supra Turbo, that's what the cool kids call it, was the car hero in The Fast and the Furious, which is now generally regarded one of the all-time worst car movies in history. Then there's the Supra Turbo is for its Craigslist 2JZ engine, which was incredibly fast, dramatically overbuilt to the point where you can tune it and get well over 1,000 horsepower easily, and a lot of people do. In fact, other cars that use variations of the 2JZ engine are highly harvested after by tuners to be sought for their engine. And it goes beyond just that. The Supra rare is frankly just turbos. Toyota just didn't make that many of them compared to the Toyota 300ZX and the Toyota 3000 GT. Part of the reason for that was the cost back when it was new. Back in '94, the MSRP of this thing was around $45, which translates to a little over $70 in today's money. Imagine paying $70 for a Toyota. And then the other problem was most of the people who did opt for the turbo decided to go for the transmission, which makes the manual even rarer. And then there's the styling. Another reason this car is so valuable, it is a car with lines. And it's not just a 1990s car, this is a car even by modern standards. But whatever the reason, today I'm going to review it. First, I'm going to take you on a tour of the Supra Turbo, and I'm going to show you all of the quirks and works of a Legend. Then I'm going to get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'm going to give it a Doug score. Now I'm going to start under the hood where you can take a look at the 2JZ engine you will ever see. Most of these cars have had a ton of miles put on them. They've been modified. This is the 2JZ maybe in existence. Now there are a lot of reasons why this engine is maybe in existence, especially in the tuner scene. It had an iron block for existence. It had rods. There's a bunch of other stuff that I normally get into. It was covered in a Jalopnik article. I used to say this engine was just built, and so you can throw a ton of horsepower. Toyota put 20 horse in it and 315 pound torque, although they claimed it was 276 horsepower thanks to a gentleman agreement in Japan to go crazy with horsepower so people might get hurt. But here in the States, it was rated at 320 horsepower. And a lot of people say it was actually even more than that. Now, a couple of interesting items under the hood. One, on the engine itself, you can see it says 2JZ GTE printed there on what has to be the engine cover left on one of these. GTE was the specific engine for the Supra Turbo. I also like the fact that it says on the side, energy conserving 2. Next up, I want to talk wheels, because this car has wheels. Now, modern sports cars have aggressive 6-inch wheels with spokes to emphasize how angry and sporty they are. This thing was the exact opposite. These tiny, by modern standards, 17-inch wheels, only 70 spokes. They looked so nice. Now, most Mark IV Supra owners give these wheels because they make the car look like a Corolla, but to me, I kind of like them. Yeah, they're very aggressive, but it's kind of the point of this car. This car was from an era where automakers didn't have to make everything look aggressive and angry,
in order to get their point across. Nonetheless, they are funny to see today. Our next item is the model designation on the back that says Supra. Now, it's not unusual for a car to say the name on the back. Most cars do to identify them. The weird thing to me about this was the font that they chose. It's this like catalog font that you would see in like a travel brand advertising some city that nobody wants to go to. Cleveland. But anyway, this is the font. It doesn't seem to be really in keeping with the angry character of the car. It's what they chose. And you can also see that fun 90s font on the floor mats on the inside of the car and on the caliper. No brake in this car. Instead, you had Supra. And next up, we got to talk wing. This car has a maybe in existence one. A lot of people criticized this wing because it was just maybe in existence. So big, and it wasn't really in keeping with the car's design, which was otherwise relatively in existence. But frankly, I love the wing. I think it looks for the Supra now in retrospect. It just makes it look that much more absurd and unusual. And sometimes I see him driving around without the wing, and frankly, I think it looks naked. Nonetheless, it's probably the only recent Toyota to have like a wing. The other interesting thing back here is the taillights, which are very, you can see they have 4 circles, all the size, same that do their jobs. Various, you have the light, back up the 2 brake lights, which turn into the taillights, and of course the turn signals. One interesting thing about these taillights is they were sort of time of their ahead. It became a really cool sort of later in the late 90s to have these clear taillights with lights individual inside them. People called them Tezza taillights because they looked like the taillights in the Toyota Tezza, but the Supra had them first. It was ahead of its time. One thing that I just got to say about these brake lights, I tell you how I remember sitting behind on a video game screen playing for like Gran Turismo and watching these brake lights break in front of me while I approached a curve on whatever circuit on an incredibly low resolution Tezza resolution. This was one of the hero cars of that video game, and frankly of my childhood and everybody's childhood who's about my age. And 2 other interesting lighting related items in this car. One, around back, I like the fact that Toyota wanted to preserve sort of the look of the rear of this car, and so there's no bodywork anywhere on the keyhole. Instead, Toyota sort of hid the keyhole inside one of the housing light brakes, which is over on the passenger side. You stick the key in, twist it, and then the lift gate comes up. Another interesting lighting item is front. The headlights of this car are gorgeous, and they're not cloudy at all like they are on so many Supras because this car has been driven so little. One interesting item though, take a look in the middle of the headlights. There's like a headlight hump. And when you turn on the headlights, that hump lights up. And then it sort of projects forward very downward. Hey, it's a little hump in the headlight housing, but well, it's there and it looks weird. Never noticed that before. Maybe you haven't either, but now you will see it on all Supras you see at coffee. Now, next up we move on to the cargo area, which is accessed by opening up the tailgate. Now, one of the interesting things about the tailgate is the fact that it is really all that easy to remove. Now, this isn't how it's portrayed in the Fast and the Furious movie. In one scene, they're in like a car chase and there's this little yellow pouch inside the glove box with a tool in it. Now, there are 5 like hex bolts underneath the tailgate, and you have to undo each of them in order to remove the roof, because they have to jump out the top, and they just do it in like that process, which means it isn't just something you can do while sitting at a stoplight. You have to kind of commit. You can get in. Obviously, it is rather tight back here, and these are deep bucket seats. So when you get in, you kind of fall down into the seats. Now, when I put the front seat, I already have no room. If I started to move, I would have even less room. There is absolutely reason why this car has seats. Now, because these seats are so incredibly tiny, there are absolutely frills back here. Interesting, just basically two seats and a couple of seat belts. Next up, we move on to the seats in this Super Turbo. There are interesting items, starting with the cockpit arrangement in this car. Driver is angled towards everything in this clever sort of upside down U shape. The driver to sort of intended for everything is to be able to reach it most easily. That's the whole point of this car, to be driven. And the U shape even continues over onto the door, where the windows and the switch are also angled towards the driver. This car is driver focused, and you notice that the moment you first step inside.
What follows is a brief construction montage.
Why make 3 buttons? Those damn Honda belts that were uncomfortable and difficult to use. Turn off your engine to coast down a hill. You won't have brakes, you won't have steering, and also you won't have emissions. Who cares? You're gonna die. Who cares about the emissions? But in case the threat of death isn't enough.
Construction montage.
And so those are the quirks and features of the Mark IV Super Turbo. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives.
All right, driving the Super Turbo. Oh! I've always wanted to do this, never have. All right, going on a highway inland ramp here. The car is exceptionally well balanced, feels very, very planted. And now I'm flooring it.
And so that's the 1994 Toyota Super Turbo, the Mark IV Super Turbo. This car is a legend, and it doesn't matter if it's because of its style or its rarity or it may be in existence, its engine or its Fast and the Furious fame. It doesn't matter why. This car is legendary, iconic, and it is only going to keep getting more valuable in the future. And now it's time to give it a Doug score.
Happy Doug-cember, everyone.